love it. I love it. I love it. Look at this. This is the greatest thing I've ever seen.
Hey, I'm not surprised.
What's up, guys? Leighton here for UFC Gambling Addicts, back again with another UFC breakdown and prediction video. This will be UFC on ESPN 6, Reyes versus Weidman, and this will be on a Friday night, so it's going to be quite weird, bit of a change. And this card will take place in Boston. Before we get into the breakdown of this card, we're going to take a look at the poll from last week. We're going to take a look at some comments, some bets. And then we're going to do a little recap of the card from last night. So we'll start with the poll. JJ versus Michelle Waterson. We had 72% for the Boogie Woman and 28% for Michelle Waterson. I said to myself before I made this poll, if Michelle Waterson gets anything over 25% in this poll, I won't believe it. So she got 28%, not too bad. I'm going to say at least 8% of people who chose Michelle Waterson there did it for the odds. Maybe even more than 8%. She got herself to the dance, you know, but just 25 minutes of pretty much domination from JJ, you know. I said in the prediction video, it's really hard to picture anyone outpointing this girl, outstriking this girl. And she broke her foot, man. She broke her foot in like the third round. And she just kept going, you know. So Anthony Pettis, if you're watching that fight or if you're listening to this, which you most likely definitely aren't listening to this, but if you watch that fight, take note, Mr. Anthony Pettis. Now let's take a look at some comments. Jason Perry said, Kron Gracie at Jiu-Jitsu. Kron is terrible MMA fighter. Cub is going to punch his face in. I wouldn't say Kron is bad at MMA. You know, we saw that fight last night, and I'm not denying the Cub pick took a lot of faith from anyone who took that pick. But Kron, man, he showed us a lot, right? He just kept walking forward. He was eating all of these body shots. He was eating shots to the skull. And he just kept coming forward. So you could really see that Nate Diaz style from Kron Gracie last night. You know, he didn't really fight his fight. He didn't really get it to the mat. He got it to the mat when they were very sweaty, which was something I pointed out in that breakdown. You know, if Cub can see the finish line and they're very sweaty, he's going to get there. But Kron, man, he showed us a lot. He just kept coming forward. And, you know, I can't wait for his next fight, because if he gets a favourable matchup, I'm definitely going to pick Kron. Dexter said, most confident pick I have on this card is Davison. I don't think Tim can take this to the ground, and Davison might steal a round or two by taking Tim down, and he has the advantage in the stand-up too. Lovely comment, beautiful comment, and I agree with it. However, the first 2 minutes of that fight, Tim was really, he was getting me on my seat a little bit, you know, getting me on the edge of my seat, being very unorthodox, which we all knew he was gonna be. But for the first 2 minutes of that fight, Tim Elliott was scoring nicely, and then, you know, Davison Figueiredo proves to us once again why he's such a top contender at 125. To see him sink in that choke on Tim Elliott, and just, you know, you could see straight away on Tim Elliott's face, you know, that was a nasty, tight, strong choke. And a little bit nasty from Figueiredo not to let go straight away. You know, you can see very evidently that Tim Means is tapping quite hard. The ref is trying to stop it, and he's a little bit nasty from Davison Figueiredo, but very impressive finish, very impressive. And Potato said, James Vick looks straight out of the Michael Jackson Thriller at lightweight. I hope welterweight helps him. He needs to work on his head movement. It's getting depressing thinking he's turning into a practice dummy in there. I mean, I predicted the round 1 TKO for Nico Price, and I said, listen, if I'm wrong, I'm happy for James. You know, I don't really want to be right on this one. And James Vick just proves to us once again, you know, no head movement. You know, to get finished with an up kick because your head is just there, you know, that literally defines how bad James is at moving his head. Like, has Nico Price on his back and he thinks, well, I'm fine here. Yeah, James Vick is just the type of guy to show us once again he has no head movement whilst his opponent is laying on his back. Absolutely crazy from Niko Price. Like I said, he's a finisher. The guy is a complete madman. At every second in every round, he's looking to finish you. He's not looking to score. He's looking to end you in there. And once again, a crazy, creative finish from Niko Price. You know, he had those hammer fists against Randy Brown. This time, he has this insane up kick on a guy who has no head movement. So, crazy. Let's take a look at some bets. Now, for bets last night for me, it wasn't great. A few people, if like Pena came in, Griffin, or a few others, it would have been a very good night. I invested £150. I finished on like 160, so hardly no profit at all. But these were the bets: Marlon Vera, Miguel Baeza, Niko Price, decent little bet. Then we had Niko Price, Cub, and JJ. Like I said, man, if a few others came in, it would have been a very decent night. But I hope, you know, a few of you watching had a very good night. So we're going to do a quick recap, a very quick one. Don't want to waste too much time on it. The first fight of the night, JJ Aldrich versus Lauren Mueller. Not really too much to say. Lauren looked like she stole the second round, maybe. Did on a couple cards, but JJ Aldrich in the third round really came out and landed some really significant strikes, which took the fight for her. You know, good win for JJ Aldrich. Marvin Vettori, Andrew Sanchez. Man, Vettori was looking for that TKO. He was throwing heat. Andrew Sanchez just basically absorbing all of these shots. For some reason, throwing question mark kicks, which at one point his team just said, save that, because I had no clue why he was throwing that. Andrew Sanchez, you're a wrestler. You should try to wrestle. Anyone who did take Andrew Sanchez, I'm sorry, he didn't wrestle, man. Miguel Baeza, Hector Aldana. Really impressive, because in that breakdown I said, Hector Aldana has this crazy powerful calf kick. Now, the guy inside the octagon with who was landing the calf kick was Miguel Baeza. And he got the finish with that. So really impressive to see that type of finish from Miguel Baeza. Marlon Vera, Andre Ewell. That was a really fun fight. I really liked that fight. After the first round, you know, I have this betting group. I've spoken about it a couple of times. Will Martin, also a part of this betting group. I said to my betting group after the first round, look, Andre Ewell won that round, but man, you see him returning to his chair, his stool, like, he was tired. He was really tired at the end of that first round. And it's surprising because him being on top of Marlon Vera, surviving that choke, made him tired, which is crazy. So Andre Ewell has to work on his conditioning. If he had better conditioning, maybe he could have got the decision or even found the finish. But Marlon Vera, man, the guy is a dog. The guy is such a dog. I saw a few people counting him out on the feet, which I really didn't give him a disadvantage on the feet either, man. The guy he competes everywhere. He's nasty. Davison Figueiredo, Tim Elliott, like I said with the comment earlier, Tim Elliott started really good. Those first 2 minutes, he started very well. Then Davison Figueiredo just basically, you know, he showed us, look, I'm a real contender here. I can sub you, end up on top. I can knock you out. I can go the distance. Looked really good in there. Alex Morono, Max Griffin. Really close fight. Such a close fight. The first round, who do you give it to? I don't know. Maybe Morono, maybe Max Griffin. Just the first round was so close. Second round, for 4 minutes, I was scoring it to Max Griffin. And then that head kick landed and the follow-up knees, you had to give that round to Morono. However, I wouldn't give it an 8. I just wouldn't give that round an 8 to Max Griffin. I know he was so close to being done. However, when you win the round for 4 minutes 20 or whatever, surely you get a 9 there. The third round being extremely close again. But yeah, really a little bit of a strange decision to see Max Griffin get the 8. It is understandable, obviously, when you come that close to being finished. However, if the round is so clear that it's yours, then I feel like we should give guys a little bit of leeway, you know. Give Max Griffin the 9 in round 2. Mike Davis and Thomas Gifford was horrible to watch. Just so bad. So bad. And the thing is, last week we had a really, really good fight. We had Jamie Malarkey versus Brad Riddell. And you look at that fight, and Jamie Malarkey was taking a lot of damage in round 3. However, he was still competing. He was giving his best back, and he was still there. The difference is Thomas Gifford was never ever at any point hurting Mike Davis. He had absolutely nothing to offer, and it was horrible to see that guy take so much damage. You know, I'm going to tell you guys something now. My girlfriend, she watches these fights with me every single week. She's watched over 1,000 fights. She hasn't missed a fight in ages. And that is the first time I have ever seen my girlfriend in tears after watching a fight. That's how bad that fight was. Like, that ref needs serious, like, speaking to. Just, like, sack that ref. Like, that fight was so horrible to watch, and I'm disgusted as an MMA fan to see Thomas Gifford have his dad in the corner, not throw the towel in. You know, horrible. Like, I'm getting a little heated just speaking about it now, but to see Thomas Gifford take that much damage, it was so hard to be such a hardcore MMA fan, and to see that, it was disgusting. A few others, Ryan Spann, very calm and composed in the first round, good finish. Eric Anders and GM3, you know, that's a decision that could have gone either way. Personally, I had it to GM3, but you know, it such a close fight, you can't really argue with it. Matt Frivola, Luis Pena, another one that is very, very close. You can't really argue with the decision, but I'm sure a few people out there on Pena feel like he won that fight, and I'm sure a few out there felt Frivola won. So once again, you can't argue with that decision. Mackenzie Dern, I'm just going to skip past that because just wow, you know, wow. Nico Price with that amazing up kick was insane. Cub, you know, I'm glad I put my faith into Cub. He did what he needed to do out there. And JJ, like I said at the start of this podcast, just it's so hard to imagine anyone outscoring this girl. She's very special. Okay, let's move on and we're starting with the first fight of the night, which is Daniel Daddy Longleg Spitz versus Tanner the Bulldozer Boser. We'll start with Daniel Spitz. So he comes into this fight 1 win, 2 losses inside the UFC, training out of Sick Jitsu. He's 6'7" with an 82-inch reach. Primarily a boxer inside the octagon, although he does throw the occasional kick, but mainly effective with his boxing. In his debut against Mark Godbeer, you know, really showed us he can eat a lot of calf kicks, a lot of body kicks. Looking at the Walt Harris fight, you can really see that Daniel Spitz is trying to be a counter fighter. He's trying to counter box in there, and that's how he's trying to hurt you. So you take a look at his quick win against Anthony Hamilton. Counter. He's trying to counter you. So he's quite patient, quite a patient heavyweight. Very long legs that you can target, but you have to watch out. You know, he's 6'7", very long, and if he counters you, it could be a very early night for you. So taking a look at his opponent, Tanner Boser, the Bulldozer, comes into this fight making his UFC debut. 16 wins, 5 losses as a pro. Seems quite undersized for heavyweight. Has like a karate background. Also a very composed, patient guy in there. So quite a strange fight to make a pick on, because we have a 6'7" guy who's trying to be the counter fighter, and then we have this Tanner Boser guy who seems very undersized, and he's also trying to be the counter fighter. It's a hard one. It's a hard one to predict, and I don't really know how it's going to go down. But if I had to make a prediction, I'd maybe say that those daddy long legs are going to eat one too many calf kicks, and maybe it looks a little bit like his debut against Mark Godbeer. You know, like I said, Mark Godbeer really targeted the midsection and the calves, and obviously done what Mark does. You know, throws a lot of power shots to the guard, to the head. So yeah, this is one of those fights, man, where no one really knows. No one really knows what's going to happen. Maybe Daniel Spitz makes the connection, makes a nice counter shot and drops Tanner, or maybe Tanner is very calm and composed in there, picks his shots at the calves, and maybe gets like a dominant decision win, or maybe even finishes Daniel Spitz with calf kicks, like we just saw with Miguel Baeza. It's a tough one. I don't really know, to be honest. I don't think anyone really knows, but my pick is going to be Tanner Boser via decision. Okay, taking a look at the odds. We have minus 140, minus 135 for Tanner, and then we have plus 115, plus 120, plus 110 for Daniel Spitz. And that sounds perfect to me. That sounds like a lot of money is going on both sides. And rightfully so, because no one really knows. You know, I don't look at Daniel Spitz as a high-level heavyweight. I don't really look at Tanner Boser, from the tape I've seen, as a high-level heavyweight. So, yeah, I have no real insight. But if I had to, which, you know, I don't really have to, but I will say, I think Tanner Boser maybe targets the calves. Okay, moving on into the next one. This is a decent fight too. We have Kevin, the Trailblazer Holland, versus Brendan All-In Allen. We'll start with the Trailblazer. So, comes into this fight 3-1 inside the UFC, a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a second-degree black belt in Kung Fu, which we can see when Kevin Holland decides to kickbox. Very good kicker, fires nasty body kicks. Can go high with the kicks or go low. Mainly throws the kicks towards the midsection. Very good at doing that. Very powerful body kicks from Kevin Holland. Isn't the biggest 185er. Doesn't cut much weight for 185. Usually the smaller guy in there. But you know, Kevin Holland, man, he's a good guy. He's a very good guy. Very underrated grappler. Likes to joke around in there a little bit too much for my liking, but that's just the style of Kevin Holland. You know, that's how he keeps calm. Everyone has their own way of dealing with situations, and Kevin Holland's way of dealing with pressure in these situations is to make a joke out of it. So we don't see that kind of stuff every week. When we do see it, we kind of look at it as like, oh, this guy's cocky, this guy's cocky. And maybe Kevin Holland is quite cocky, but that's just him. That's how he deals with pressure. So taking a look out of some of his fights, you know, he took that short notice debut against Thiago Santos, and I actually took him in that fight. I feel like Kevin Holland is a very underrated grappler. Actually came quite close to a submission in that fight, but for the most part he was just beat up, and he just kept asking Thiago Santos like, hey, stop hitting me so hard. Like, he's a real joker inside the octagon. Potentially could have lost to GM3. That was a very close fight. A lot of grappling in that one. But yeah, for the most part, man, Kevin Holland, I really like him. I think he has a very good, decent, underrated skill set as a fighter. So, taking a look at his opponent, Brendan All-In Allen, comes into this fight 12 wins, 3 losses as a pro. Training out of, I believe it's Rufus Sport MMA. Could be wrong, but I believe I'm right. We saw him a couple months ago. We saw him on the Contender Series against Aaron Jeffrey. Very decent performance. You could say it's very decent. Held against the fence a little bit, but it looked like he was more than happy to be held against the fence. You know, he's very sneaky in the clinch. Throws some nasty knees. He searches for submissions in the clinch as well. Seems like he wants to be on the mat with you as well. He seems like a very well-rounded guy. He can become quite stationary on his feet, but you know, this guy, he's decent. He has good knockout power in his hands, and in the clinch, he seems to thrive there. So it's a tough pick because both guys seem to be good grapplers. But I think Kevin Holland he's seen it before. He's seen everything in the clinch. And I don't think Brendan Allen's going to surprise him with anything new. Now, so if I'm giving Kevin Holland the advantage in the clinch, or, you know, at least no disadvantage in the clinch, then I would have to put this one down to kickboxing. And I think Kevin Holland is also a very underrated kickboxer. So yeah, it's a tough pick. But I think Kevin Holland has had much tougher fights than this before. And he seems to be on a good run. So I'll take him here. I'll take Kevin Holland via decision because Brendan Allen looks very, very tough to finish. So I'll take a close decision for Kevin Holland. Taking a look at the odds, we have minus 150 for Kevin Holland, minus 155, plus 135, 130, 125 for Brendan Allen, plus 140 on some sites. Well, yeah, I agree with them, man. I agree with these odds. You know, a very slight favourite is Kevin Holland, and rightfully so, because Brendan Allen, man, he looks like an impressive guy. And I did forget to mention the losses Brendan Allen has are to top guys. You know, he's lost to Trevin Giles, Eric Anders, and Anthony Hernandez. Now, those are three guys who made it to the UFC. So, once again, man, Brendan Allen, he has 3 losses to top competition, and he looks like he could be top competition himself. So, a very close fight to imagine in your head and to predict. And I think the line we have here reflects it. I think it's a very playable line for both sides. Kevin Holland's line may even drop a little bit. I think he could become like a minus 130. So I'll probably wait for that to see if I'm right. Okay, moving on into the next one. Another tough one to decide on, man. Wow. Sean Brady versus Court the Crusher McGee. This is a tough one, man. So I'll start with Sean Brady. Comes into this fight 10-0 as a pro. He's on a 14-fight win streak, if you count his amateur fights. Training out of Renzo Gracie in Philadelphia. And this guy, man, he seems like a very well-rounded guy, just like Brendan Allen. Like, this guy uses really nice spinning attacks. He spins to the body. He spins to the head. Power puncher. On the mat, looks very good. Looks like he has very strong top control on the mat. Not afraid to take it to the mat. Just a well-rounded guy. A very, very well-rounded guy who clearly deserves his shot inside the UFC. Now, the level of competition this guy's fought hasn't been great. But I'm sure a lot of people listening to what I just said there, you know, we all agree. We all pretty much agree. Well, the competition isn't going to be great. You're not in the UFC yet. You're still climbing to that point in your career. So it's always acknowledge that guys haven't fought the best competition prior, but always acknowledge why. You know, we understand why. But from what I have seen, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have watched some tape on Sean Brady, he looks very good. Very well-rounded, can grapple, can punch. The spinning attacks to the body. Looks like a really good guy. Now, Court McGee comes into this fight 8 wins, 7 losses inside the UFC. So, not the best UFC record. And that's because this guy's just a grinder. You know, he has this dirty grind mentality. Has a very high output for a welterweight. For a welterweight guy, very high output. He's always just staying in your face, just annoying you. You know, even if he's losing these rounds and it's 4 minutes into the first round and you're watching this fight going, Court McGee's been hit with some big strikes. He's just still there, popping away at you, just being like a nuisance. You know, just won't go away, just grinding. Very good MMA guy himself, very experienced. He can mix it up, look for takedowns. He has very good jiu-jitsu when the fight hits the mat. So this is a tough one, man. Real tough one, because you have to look at Court McGee and say, well, listen, this guy is a veteran, if you want. This guy's had quite a few fights in the UFC. Seems very well-rounded. But how hungry is he? So I believe most people should be picking here based off of the expectations you have of Sean Brady entering the UFC and the expectations you would hold for Court McGee in 2019. You know, how hungry is Court McGee at this point? You know, personally, I think he's still a good competitor. You know, I look at that split loss to Diego Lima, very, very close fight. You know, he was always competing. Just a veteran, man. And I personally, I believe in Court McGee still. I think he's a good guy. You know, he's not the type of guy that you watch at 170 and go, this guy's gonna fight for the title. He will never ever be that guy. But he is a nuisance there, and he's not a great debut fight. You know, unless you're just this huge power puncher and you're knocking everyone out, maybe. But for the most part, I like Court McGee as a good competitor, and I think he could give this guy a very, very tough debut if he's just there. You know, in the second round, if the second round comes, if he's just there, chipping away still, mixing it up with takedowns, I think this fight really could play into Court McGee's hands. Another thing to mention, obviously, which is obvious, this is Sean Brady's biggest test in his career. You know, he's still stepping up in the fight game, and this is his biggest test. This is not Court McGee's biggest test. You know, he's fought much harder competition than Sean Brady. So this goes back to my previous point. You need to decide how hungry you believe Court McGee still is inside the fight game. Personally, like I said, I think he's still hungry. I think he's a good competitor. So I'm going to take Court McGee to win via decision. And we take a look at the odds. Baby. Plus 190 for Court McGee. Plus 200 for Court McGee. I like it, man. Like I said, I know Court McGee isn't one of these guys at 170 who you watch and you say this guy's a star. But he's a good guy, and rightfully so. You know, he's still in the UFC. Now, Sean Brady coming back, minus 250, minus 235, minus 227 is the best price you can get on him. It's a little deep for a guy who hasn't fought the best competition, still proving himself as a fighter. But like I said, man, it is a winnable fight for both guys. I do believe Sean Brady could go on to be a real good guy in the UFC. So maybe he proves a lot to me in this fight in beating Court McGee, but I have to stick here with the guy who's had bigger tests than this. You know, he's a good guy, Court McGee. So at plus 200, man, I'm willing to take it. Okay, we're gonna smoke a bowl here, just a quick one. I know some people appreciate giving me some time to get more in touch with my fight spirit kind of thing or whatever. Okay, let's get on into the next one here. We have Kyle Crash Bochniak versus Sean the Sniper Woodson. I'll be starting with Kyle. Kyle comes into this fight 2 wins, 4 losses inside the UFC. So let's start this breakdown in this fight by saying Kyle Bochniak potentially fighting for his UFC job here, his career. Training out of Broadway Jiu-Jitsu and Lauzon MMA. Kyle is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And I feel like I would be a part of the minority in saying I quite kind of rate Kyle Bochniak as a good kickboxer. You know, I'm sure a lot of you disagree, but I think Kyle Bochniak is a good kickboxer. You take a look at his Brandon Davis fight, where potentially even at that point he was fighting for his job, and he just kept circling, looked really good in there. his conditioning looked very good against Brandon Davis, landing a lot of calf kicks, getting in, getting out. Very impressive performance to save his job, potentially, against Brandon Davis. Now, I was at his fight in New York, live, against Zabit. And, you know, I took Zabit. I'm sure 95% of people listening to this took Zabit. But I'm sure 95% of us listening to this, we all felt Karl Bochniak proved a lot to us, right? He went out there and he just tried to put it on Zabit. Now, Zabit did break his hand, supposedly, before that fight, which is crazy to see Zabit still compete at that high level against a complete madman on the night against Karl Bochniak. But Karl, he really impressed me, man. He knew he was a massive underdog in that fight, and he didn't lay down. He went out there, and he really tried to put it on Zabit and impressed me, man. You know, like the whole arena, myself and the whole arena, we stood to our feet in that last 10 seconds. I'm sure some people listening to this were at that card in New York on that night. We stood to our feet and clapped those two men in the octagon because it was an amazing fight. And then you look at his most recent fight where quite strange against Hakeem. Close fight. But if anyone can remember, Karl Bochniak kept doing this thing with his shorts. Like he kept it was this weird thing, like a mental thing. He kept touching his shorts, which was really weird to see. So hopefully Karl Bochniak doesn't have the baggy shorts for this one. But yeah, this is a tough one. This is a tough fight to predict because we've seen how big and long Sean Woodson is. So Sean the Sniper Woodson comes into this fight 6-0 as a pro. We saw him a few months ago on the Contender Series where he was potentially losing that fight right up until the point where we all just screamed. A devastating flying knee from Sean Woodson in that fight. If you haven't seen it, you have to go type it in and watch it because it's devastating. Sean Woodson, he used to fight at 185, which is probably the right weight class for this size of man. Even competed at 155, but somehow is making 145 at 6'2", which is insane. You know, that's like James Vick level. So yeah, you look at this fight and it's one of those ones where if you believe Karl Bochniak can get in and get out, land those calf kicks, fighting for his job, if you believe Karl Bochniak can do it, I'd say go for Kyle, man. And I do believe he can do it. However, when you see Sean Woodson end that fight on the Contender Series the way he did, you know, Karl Bochniak isn't the greatest guy in the UFC. So, anything can happen in this fight, man. Absolutely anything can happen. But I'm going to stick with the first fight on this podcast I broke down. I said Tanner Boser, maybe the calf kicks. I'm going to go that way again. I think Karl Bochniak can see those long, skinny legs of Sean Woodson. I think he's going to target him. I think he's going to target him and just keep moving. You know, when he's landed 3 or 4 of those calf kicks, once you start circling, the opponent's following you and it's getting harder and harder to follow you because those calf kicks are adding up. So the more you land, you know, after 7 or 8 calf kicks from Karl Bochniak here, Sean Woodson's already, you know, 1 foot out of the door, basically. You know, one calf just completely done. So yeah, I'm going to take Karl Bochniak to save his job here against a very tall, long-rangey 145er. And I'll take Karl Bochniak via decision. Okay, taking a look at the odds. Very good odds, man. We have minus 117, 125, minus 130 for Kyle. And then we have Sean returning as evens, plus 100, plus 105. And I agree with that line. You know, we have Karl Bochniak potentially fighting for his job. And we have Sean Woodson, who looks like a skeleton at 145, coming in. It's probably going to be quite slower than Kyle. It's a tough one, man. It's a tough one, but I agree with those odds. Obviously, a lot of money going on both lines. Both lines extremely playable. And I'm going to play with the Karl Bochniak line. Okay, moving on into the next one. We have Who do we have here? We have Randy the Zohan Costa versus Boston Boom Boom Salmon. Oh man, this is wow. This card, man. I swear, when I look at these cards, I make my picks, and then when I go to speak about them out loud, they just become complete pick'ems. Like, this is a hard one to predict again. We have Randy Costa comes into this fight 0-1 inside the UFC, training out of Lauzon MMA. Prior to the UFC, Randy Costa had 4 really impressive finishes, very quick finishes, looking very good. Now, had a very tough debut against Brandon Davis, a guy who can, you know, he can brawl with you. Brandon Davis is a very good kickboxer, good underrated grappling, that a lot of us now don't underrate, because a lot of us took Brandon Davis against Chikadze. I wasn't one of those, but I know a lot of us did. So this fight is, I think this is a much better fight for Randy Costa than his debut, purely stylistically. Like, Randy Costa just seems like this guy who wants to take your head off. Like, he has extreme power in his hands. Trains at a good gym in Lauzon MMA, but, you know, he's not looking to grapple. He's looking to throw some heavy heat, real power. He's looking to finish you. Boston Salmon comes into this fight also 0-1 inside the UFC, training out of Extreme Couture. And this guy's a very good boxer himself. Boston Salmon is a very good boxer. He's been boxing over half of his life. So when I think about this fight, when these two guys standing in front of each other, trading shot for shot, it looks beautiful in my head, because both guys, they want to take your head off. It's a tough one. It's another tough one, man, because I think Randy Costa is nowhere near as technical of a boxer as Boston, but I think Randy Costa's so much more about that life. I think he wants to just, you know, he doesn't mind getting hit, and he's going to get hit and to hit you. I feel like Boston doesn't want to get hit, and he only wants to hit you. So it's one of those ones where I'm picking the guy who I feel isn't the better boxer, but more of a dog, you know, just a dog. And I think Randy Costa's a dog, man. I think if he lands that same shot that Taha landed against Boston, you know, anything that's heavy, hard, quick, I think maybe Boston's going to go down again real quick. So maybe Boston can connect with Randy Costa, because I said Boston is a very good boxer, man. He's been boxing nearly his whole life. So I think it's a winnable fight for both guys, and near impossible to make a prediction that you are extremely confident in. But I predict, man. That's what I do here. I make predictions. And I think Randy Costa is way more about this MMA life than Boston Salmon. So I'm going to take a round 1 TKO for Randy Costa. And we take a look at the odds. Oh, man. We have Boston. Oh, Boston Salmon. -150. -170. -165. Oh, I like it. And we have Randy Costa returning +150, +147, +130, +120. So it appears that Randy Costa's price is going to drop. So if you're going to take Randy Costa, maybe get it in now, because for the most of the board he's close to +150, but at Bovada he's +120. At William Hill +138, which is my bookie, so I have to get on that one tonight. Yeah, I agree with the line. Like I said, I think Boston Salmon is a better boxer, and I think the money is showing that here. A lot of people going with Boston Salmon here, but I think Randy Costa is a good boxer himself. Maybe not as good, but I feel like he's way more about that life. You know, he's willing to get hit, and I don't think Boston is. So that's why I'm going to take the underdog here. So that's 2 underdogs in a row. Ooh, okay. Moving on into the next one. We have Molly Meatball McCann versus Diana the warrior princess Belbita. Wow. Okay, let's go. Molly comes into this fight 2 wins, 1 loss inside the UFC, and I've been to a couple of her fights actually. I was at her debut against Gillian Robertson, which was in Liverpool. I couldn't. I've said this like 2 times now on this channel, and I'm going to say it again. I couldn't believe that Gillian Robertson was an underdog that night. You know, I was all about her jiu-jitsu that night, and she got it done like that. You know, she left Molly McCann choked out on the mat in front of her own people, which it silenced the crowd. It was a silencer. Since then, I was at her second fight, which was against the Zombie Girl, which was in London this time. A much better performance. A much better performance. She wasn't taken down. She even got her own takedowns at time. It wasn't secured. You know, the Zombie Girl popped back to her feet, but got her own takedowns, was landing her own shots. Much better performance from Molly in that fight. And then we take a look at her most recent fight against Ariane Lipski. This one being the most impressive one for sure. I'm sure a lot of us counted Molly out in that fight. We felt Lipski was the much more better striker. Much more technical, better with the kicks, better with range, faster, as powerful as Molly McCann. Even, you know, I'm sure a lot of us felt Lipski would grapple Molly McCann. And Molly McCann proved a lot of us wrong. She proved a lot of us wrong in that fight. Got her own takedown. Again, this time she secured it. So, like I said with the Zombie Girl, she got her takedowns in that fight, but it wasn't secured. The Zombie Girl got back to her feet. Against Ariane Lipski, she got her takedown and secured it. So we have to just take notes like that, where we see someone improving, but then we see improvements on top of improvements, and we have to give that to Molly McCann. She is definitely improved. She's a power striker mainly. She's looking to take your head off, but we have to go ahead and say, look, she can grapple too. She's definitely improved when it comes to grappling. So taking a look at her opponent, Diana Belbita, comes into this fight making her UFC debut, 13-4 as a pro. I'm not really sure what to make of this girl. Her foundation appears to be kickboxing, but she seems to be a much better kicker than boxer. Her hands don't seem too powerful. She's a kickboxer, but her kicks, her knees, they seem to be the effective side of Belbita's game, whereas her hands, I see girls kind of disrespect her power when it comes to her hands. So, taking a look at Diana's tape, I've seen some ways that she's lost. You know, these girls, a couple girls, Ariane Lipski being one of them actually, who beat Diana Belbita. If you can back this girl up, if you can take away her space to kickboxing, you can really put a beating on this girl. You know, you can even her takedown defense, it isn't the greatest. I've seen her taken down more than once in the tape I've seen. But styles make fights. You know, styles make fights. If Diana Belbita had space to work with and use her foundation of having space to kickbox, then she's going to win a lot of fights. If you take away that space, where the kicks are no longer powerful because she hasn't got room to kick, wind it up, you know, you force her into a brawl, a boxing match, a dirty fight. And Molly McCann looked great at doing that against Ariane Lipski, and I think she can look great at doing that again here. So if Molly McCann sets a high-paced fight, looks to back up Diana a lot, make her brawl, make her realise, look, you're in a fight and it's not going to be your fight, it's going to be a dirty fight, it's going to involve a lot of grappling and hardly no space between us, then I think Molly McCann's going to thrive in this spot. So yeah, I'm going to take Molly McCann here to take away the space and force Diana into her type of fight. So I'll take Molly McCann via decision. Taking a look at the odds. Where are you? Where are you, odds? There we are. Whoa, minus 345, minus 335 for Molly McCann. So I feel like a lot of us see her taking away some space and forcing Diana into a dirty Molly McCann fight. Wow, I'm not going to touch that line, obviously. That's insane. And this is women's MMA. So, yeah, plus 300 for Diana, which is, I'm sure a lot of you out there listening to this are going to stab at that. I know you boys. I know you boys. Wow, insane. Okay, let's move on into the next fight, and then we'll do a little smoke break again. What's the next one? We have Manny, the Bermudez Triangle. Bermudez versus Charles Boston Strong Rosa. And I'll be starting with Manny Bermudez. Comes into this fight 3-1 inside the UFC. A purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Started competing in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at 13 years old. He'll be stepping up to 145 in this fight, which is a smart move. Obviously, at this point, you know, he's really struggled to make 135, and that hasn't been surprising. You know, he's a very big man. He's 5'10". You shouldn't be making 135 at 5'10". There was a picture, you know, at his last fight where he stood next to Yoel Romero, because Yoel was on the same card, and he looked massive. Like, making 135 looking big next to Yoel Romero is insane. So, stepping up to 145 here. And I know a few people are going to be thinking, look, this guy was very strong at 135. He's just going to be another guy at 145. But I tend to disagree with that. I think Manny Bermudez is going to be even stronger at 145. And I know a lot of people are saying at this point, well, his opponents will be too. That's right. You know, some people are going to give him a good go. But I don't think Charles Rosa is going to be one of those guys. I think Manny Bermudez is going to be much, much stronger in this spot. I believe he's going to use the same game plan as he's always used at 35. Look to grapple, look to put guys up in a body lock, take it to the mat, and show the other guy, look, I'm stronger here, I have very good jiu-jitsu, I'm going to choke you out or snap a limb. So, taking a look at his last fight against Casey Kenny, you know, the weight cut is obviously a huge factor into that fight. But the strange thing was, Manny Bermudez showed up in round 3. Showed up in round 3. Like, gave away the first 2 rounds, and then in the 3rd round it was like, oh, yeah, we're watching Manny Bermudez. This looks like Manny Bermudez. Like, that's so insane to me. So, although I believe that performance comes down to weight cutting, I also think it comes down to, like, ego. Like, you don't show up after a bad weight cut and show you're not there for 10 minutes and now you're there because it's very close, you know. So a little bit of both there for Manny Bermudez. He's got that loss out of the way. He was undefeated before, and I feel like this could be a case the same to Davis and Figueiredo, where we see a guy lose for the first time and come back and show us, look, I know I lost, but I'm very good and I'm going to keep being very good. So yeah, very hard not to take Manny Bermudez in this spot. We have Charles Rosa, who comes into this fight 2 wins, 3 losses inside the UFC. Now, Charles Rosa is a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so more experience than Manny Bermudez grappling. So, bit strange, you know, has more experience than what Manny Bermudez built his whole game around. Also, very unorthodox. Charles Rosa is very unorthodox on the feet. Likes to switch stances, throws a lot of kicks. Almost has that side-on karate stance, but it has been like 2.5 years or something since we've last seen him. So he's going to have a lot of ring rust to deal with. You know, not everyone can just show up after 3 years and look great. You know, Charles Rosa is Charles Rosa. He's not Nate Diaz. So stylistically, looking at this fight, I feel Charles Rosa is going to be the better striker. I think he's going to circle a lot, use a very unorthodox style of movement, and maybe outstrike Manny Bermudez. But this fight just seems like, it literally just seems like Davison Figueiredo versus Tim Elliott, apart from anyone really moving up. Like, Manny Bermudez has lost for the first time. So did Davison Figueiredo, although he had one fight after. Charles Rosa, time off. Very unorthodox guy. A good grappler. Tim Elliott, very unorthodox, time off, good grappler. So I feel the same thing can happen here. I think Charles Rosa's going to start well. But as soon as Manny Bermudez gets that body lock, I think we're going to see huge strength advantage in that clinch. And I think that's going to be the downfall here for Charles Rosa. So I'll take Manny Bermudez via submission in round number 1. Okay, and the line is a very good one. We have -140, -160, -150 for Manny Bermudez. You know, decent line. Charles Rosa +130, +125. So I feel like it's fair to say a little bit of doubt going on Manny Bermudez in this one. You know, a lot of people must be quite angry for that recent performance against Casey Kenny, and quite a few people counting him out and taking those dog odds on Charles Rosa. I wouldn't say it's a bad idea. You know, this is just my opinion on how Manny Bermudez is going to look at 145. I could be wrong. You know, I'm not God. I could be wrong, but if I had to predict, you know, if I had a gun to my head, I'd say Manny Bermudez looks very good in this spot. So yeah, I think both lines very playable, and I'm going to take Manny Bermudez at hopefully -140ish if it doesn't move. Okay, I'm going to pack a quick bowl, a little smoke break here. Should probably edit this bit out. I might do. Depends how long it takes. I always say I'll edit it out, but some people seem to appreciate the time to grab a snack, is what I saw last week. Okay, moving on into another really good fight, and a tough one to predict. This whole card is tough to predict. Winn versus Darren the Dentist Stewart. And I'll start with Winn. Winn comes into this fight 1-0 inside the UFC, training out of an extremely good camp, aka most people say this guy is the Daniel Cormier prodigy. He's a three-time high school wrestling state champ. 163-6 was his wrestling record in high school, which is insane. Also a three-time college All American wrestling champion. So this guy's wrestling credentials is right at the top. He has extremely good wrestling. He's one of the strongest guys you'll ever see come body to body at his weight class. Now the problem is he's only 5'5", so in MMA it doesn't look too good. It doesn't look too good at this weight class being 5'5", and we saw that in his debut. Now in his debut, he didn't really look to shoot on those doubles. He didn't look to shoot doubles or singles, really. You know, he was basically beating up Eric Spicely to a point where, you know, 2 minutes into that second round, 3 minutes into that second round, he was gassed. Winn was just done for. Now, that's the point where we all went, this guy's 5'5", and it does not look safe, him being tired, you know? Like, that he's a target man. His head is a target, a real target when he's tired. So it's a tough one to predict, man, because when we all saw that debut, we all felt Winn was just going to power double this guy, put him on his back. Instead, we learned about him instead, which is what we want to do every fight with these guys. We don't want to, you know, we all say what we think is going to happen. But if that doesn't happen, instead, we learn. So we learnt this time. We saw Winn on the feet. And what we did learn is his hands are extremely heavy. Like, extremely heavy. Has insane, huge power in his hands. And they're quite fast, too. Quite fast hands. Most of those shots Eric Spicely took, man, I felt like a lot of other guys would have gone down. They would have crumbled. And we have a guy here in Darren Stewart who comes into this fight 3 wins, 4 losses, 1 no contest, which was his debut. Training out of MMA Clinic, which is like 30 minutes from me in East London. And this guy is a very aggressive 185er. You know, Darren Stewart is he's basically a boxer in there. Also a black belt in Taekwondo, which we do see with the kicks. But primarily, he's looking to use some body shots or some knockout shots up top. You know, he's looking to just end the fight, basically. So I feel like, you know, although we all said Winn was going to wrestle in his debut, I feel like he has to wrestle here. But at the same time, man, we learned that he's a huge power puncher. So he could just take Darren Stewart, his head clean off. But I think the safest fight for both guys would be Winn looks to shoot that double, looks to shoot a single, use his wrestling credentials, look to be the much stronger guy in the clinch, get it to the mat. And I think for Darren Stewart, if you're there in the second round, I think every minute that goes in this fight, it's going to start to go towards Darren Stewart. He is the taller and longer guy, and that advantage isn't going to show straight away. But after 10 minutes, after 8 minutes, that advantage is going to show. You're going to see Darren Stewart start to piece up Winn more, and the fight's really going to come towards Darren Stewart. So have a very strange fight here. 2 completely different paths to victory for both guys, I feel. And it's really tough. But do you know what? I took Molly McCann. She's English. I'm going to take the other English guy on this card. I'm going to take Darren Stewart here. I think, like I said, if he doesn't get put on his back in that first round, if he is keeping it on the feet, not getting TKO'd by Winn because he does have huge power, if he's able to just be there in the second and the third, it's really going to start to show that Darren Stewart is a decent size for 185 and Winn is not a big size for 185. So I think we could start to see that. So I'm going to take Darren Stewart via a very close decision. We take a look at the odds. The odds. Minus 110 for both guys, minus 107, minus 115, but the same odds, which is, you know, that kind of reflects the 2 paths that I have for these guys. You know, if Winn shoots that double straight away in the first, does some bad damage, you know, that minus 110 becomes minus 180. If Darren Stewart doesn't get TKO'd, Winn doesn't shoot a double, and the 7th or 8th minute mark comes in this fight, that minus 110 may become minus 180. So 2 completely different paths, a very close fight to predict in your head. You know, that's why we get these lines. You know, these lines are being betted on because you, I, other people, we all picture this in our head and we just make a decision and bet on it. That's all that's happening here. So yeah, I'm going to take Darren Stewart here. Okay, moving on into the next fight. We have Macy, the future Barber, versus Gillian, the Savage Robertson. We'll start with Macy Barber. She comes into this fight 2-0 inside the UFC. Also fought on the Contender Series, which is where most of us saw her first. She's only 7-0 as a pro. And she's only 21 years old. Like, she's younger than me. She's very green in the sport. But from what we've seen, from a girl who's only 7-0, a girl who's only 21 years old, from what we've seen, we're all pretty much impressed. We're very impressed with this girl. You know, she's a very strong wrestler. Her wrestling seems to be something that most girls aren't going to handle well. JJ Aldrich really did handle it well in the first round. But like I said about the learning earlier, when we see someone like Macy Barber, who we expect to out-grapple the opponent, expect to take down the opponent, when we see her fail at that, not only do we learn that, look, she's not untouchable there, she also learns. She learns that too. So I'd have to assume that after that first round against JJ Aldrich, where she wasn't as successful as she thought she would be grappling, she's gone back, man, and I'd have to say she's become a better grappler. we have to assume she becomes a better wrestler here. So, and she won that fight. She failed her game plan, went to plan B, and won there. She finished off JJ Aldrich to knees and punches. She finished her to strikes. She started landing huge overhands that were very powerful, and she proved a lot to herself, like, hey, my plan was to go in there and take this girl down and beat her on the mat, ground and pound her. I couldn't do it. I failed. I learned. But hey, what? Even though I performed not great, I still won. I got it done with my hands. I proved a lot to myself. So for only 21 years old, man, she's still proven a lot to herself. So we can't look at this girl and go, oh, she has to win this fight. You know, we expect a lot of her. She's only 21. Like, she is so green in this sport, and she's still learning a lot about herself. And she will be for the next, 4 to 5 years. She's going to learn a lot about herself. Her opponent, Gillian Robertson, the Savage, comes into this fight 4-1 inside the UFC. Training out of ATT, another very young girl, only 24 years old. She's a jiu-jitsu practitioner. You know, she's looking to take the fight to the mat and find a way to submit you. And that's what she basically does in all of her fights. Like I said, referring to the Molly McCann fight earlier, you know, I was at that fight. I become a huge fan after that fight. And she stuck to that, you know. She's evolved fight by fight, which is what Macy Barber will do as well. Her striking has got better. You look at the last fight against Sarah Froter, where Gillian Robertson was circling a lot in that fight. She was using a good calf kick to stay on the outside to keep Froter away from her. And then she implemented takedowns and her jiu-jitsu. So you're seeing the evolution of these girls, man. You're seeing, when we watch these fights, we need to take notes on how people are improving, how they're getting better, where they're getting better. So this is a real tough one. I feel if Gillian tries to implement the same game plan that she did against Sarah, I feel if she tries to circle, calf kick, and maybe even keep the fight on the mat, maybe she doesn't want to take down Macy, but her jiu-jitsu, it seems to be much better, so maybe she will take down Macy. But Macy is a very strong wrestler and proved a lot to us with the power of her strikes against JJ Aldrich. So it's really personal preference here. It's really personal preference on who you think is going to look better in their young career. So yeah, personal preference. I feel Macy Barber has proved maybe a little bit more to us than Gillian. So I'm going to take Macy Barber here to get her takedown this time, to get one and to finish it on the mat with ground and pound. And I'm going to take Macy Barber in round number 2. So we look at the odds. Where are the odds for this one? Yep, perfect line, boys. We have plus 100, plus 105, plus 110 for Gillian Robertson, and we have minus 120, minus 125, minus 130 for Macy Barber. It's perfect. So much money's going on Gillian, so much money's going on Macy. This is why we love MMA, because we get these competitive, high-level matchups every weekend, you know? And every 2 years, or what, we'll get a complete mismatch, which is known as Thomas Gifford versus Mike Davis, you know? Every now and then we're going to get that, and we're going to be disgusted. But boxing gets this all the time. They get insane favourites where there's no need to break down anything, you know? But yeah, this perfect line, it resembles a very close matchup in all of our heads. So perfect. Moving on into the next one, we have Joe Lauzon versus Jonathan JSP Pearce. And I'll start with Joe Lauzon. Comes into this fight 14 wins, 12 losses inside the UFC. Training out of his own gym, which is pretty dope. This will be his 27th UFC fight. It will be his 43rd pro fight. So I think it's fair to say this guy's a true veteran of the sport. He can do it all. He's seen it all. You know, whatever he's seen is what he can do at this point. Like, he's a real veteran, man. So the worry and the problem is, probably should have retired a few years ago. You know, he's still kicking on. And I'm sure some of you listening to that feel, well, rightfully so, because he's still competing. And that's always like the line, you know, that's the line where we feel if guys get past a point, like quite past a point of not being able to compete, and they're old and they've had a lot of fights, then we feel, look, call it. But then you've got guys like Overeem and Lauzon who maybe should be done, but they can compete depending on the matchup. So taking a look at Joe's last fight, this was in New York. I was actually at this fight. And it was weird, man. It was weird. Like, Joe started good, but he just gassed out horribly. And it was strange because, like, the shots he was eating, it just felt like it had way more of an effect on Joe than the shots he was giving off. And like I said, he started really good. It looked like Joe was going to teach a lesson on, look, I'm a veteran. I'm going to show you how to fight here. I know a lot of people are going to count me out. A lot of people do believe in me in this fight too. But it was weird, man. Joe started really good. And then it just looked like, and I rewatched it recently. I rewatched it on Friday. The shots he was eating, it just felt like it was stopping him way more than what his shots were doing. And that's purely down to the amount of wars this guy's been in. He's been in plenty of wars. So we have to decide here where we know Joe Lauzon is a veteran. Jonathan Pearce isn't. We know Joe Lauzon has had much tougher fights than this one he has in front of him. We know Jonathan Pearce, this is his toughest fight, arguably. We have a guy who's right at the end of his career, has seen it all, can do it all, against a guy who's just starting out in his career. So you have to decide here where, do you think Jonathan Pearce is good enough to beat Joe Lauzon? I would say yes. Looking at his Contender Series fight, I took him in that one. I believe he's an underdog in that Contender Series fight too. But he looked very good. You know, he just kept going. I believe he landed over 165 significant strikes. So, taking a look at Joe's last fight, like I said, he started to eat some shots, and he ate a lot of shots. Jonathan Pearce gave out a lot of shots in his Contender Series fight. So, if you're Jonathan Pearce, take a look at Joe's last fight. Try to replicate something like that. Try to make it ugly, make it dirty. Throw a lot of strikes the way Chris did. If you're Joe Lauzon, hopefully you've seen Jonathan Pearce's Contender Series fight. Hopefully you have quite an idea of what Jonathan wants to do. You know, he's going to want to try to replicate Joe's last fight. So Joe's had some time off. It's been a year and a half. And I think, you know, if you're smart here, if you're Joe Lauzon and you want to be smart, want to get the win, I think the best idea is probably to just straight grapple. Just grapple, shoot for a takedown, and try to sink in a quick submission. It's a tough one to decide on, boys. I'm not going to lie. I know quite a few people are probably going to disagree with me here, but one last time, I'm going to stick with the veteran. I think Joe Lauzon has one of this fight he has here is such a huge step down in competition than his whole career. It's been like quite a few years since Joe Lauzon last fought a guy who only had 11 pro fights or 12 pro fights. You know, it's been quite a few years. So this is a huge step down, and if Joe Lauzon can't win here, he has to retire. He just has to. But I'm going to stick with Joe Lauzon. I'm going to stick with the veteran one more time. And I'm going to take Joe Lauzon to get a submission in round number 2. Okay, taking a look at the odds. Ooh, minus 120, minus 118, minus 122 for minus 125 for Jonathan Pearce. Yep, I like that. Very, very slight favourite. And then we have a very, very slight underdog who seems to be turning into an even, which is Joe Lauzon, plus 105, plus 108, plus 110. At Bovada, -110. So, yeah, I mean, my complete feelings on this fight is the line. I feel a lot of people are going with that veteran experience, and also a lot of people saw how Jonathan Pearce fought on the Contender Series, and a lot of people put that, together, put that seeing Joe's last fight and how much damage he took, the output of Chris. I think community is very split on this one, and rightfully so. It's a very, very good fight to think about. It's a tough one to predict. Okay, moving on into the next one, we have Greg Hardy versus Ben Sosoli, and I'll start with Greg. Greg, the Prince of War Hardy, comes into this fight 2-1 inside the UFC, training out of ATT, also 2-0 on the Contender Series, and Greg's a guy I believe in. I believe in this guy. I think, you watch this guy prior to the UFC, you watch the Contender Series. It's very evident to see he's a huge power puncher, has huge power. But I think if you look a bit closer into these wins prior to the UFC, really look at the way he's connecting with these shots, man. He's measuring this shot. It's not just throwing power. It's not just throwing power. He is extremely accurate with his power. He's not just throwing his hands. He's looking to precisely pick a spot on your skull and to hit it very hardly. He truly, boys, go back and watch Greg Hardy, man. You'll see how accurate he is with these power strikes. And then you look at, the improvements we have to learn. We look at the improvements. A lot of people, for some reason, felt Juan Adams had a wrestling advantage, which I just didn't see at all. Both guys wrestling roughly the same amount of years. One guy has a much better camp, which would be Greg Hardy. So Greg Hardy's learning a lot. He's learning a lot. And then you look at his debut. A legal knee, got very tired in the clinch. He's learning, So we have a fight here where I think both guys mirror each other. You look at Ben Sosoli, comes into this fight making his UFC debut. On the Contender Series, it was an eye gouge, which is no contest, but he's still in the UFC. He's making his debut. And this guy is basically a power puncher. He's just a power puncher like Greg Hardy. I don't see his power punches as accurate as Greg. So, in other words, I feel like Ben Sosoli is like a very off-brand, out-of-shape Greg Hardy. Although I do see Ben Sosoli using some good judo prior to the Contender Series fight. I've seen some good judo from him. But yeah, I just see like a poor man's Hardy here. Some people will disagree with me and give Ben Sosoli a good shot here, but for the most part, I think Greg Hardy's better everywhere. I think he's quicker. I think he's more accurate. I think he's more composed. I think he's in better shape. He looks stronger. I think he has ruthless ground and pound, what we've seen. Yeah, I have to stick here once again with Greg Hardy. I haven't picked against him yet. And it won't be here. And I actually quite like that the UFC is giving Greg Hardy these learning fights. This is like a learning fight where he could win, but learn also, and rightfully so, because Greg Hardy is only 6 fights into his pro career, and I think we've already learned quite a bit about Greg Hardy in those 6 fights. If you go watch the fights, like his amateur fights before the Contender Series, you learn a lot about this guy. He's come quite a way already. But yeah, I'm going to take Greg Hardy here. I think he's just better than Ben Sosoli. Quicker, more powerful. Yeah, I'll take Greg Hardy via TKO in round number 1. We take a look at the odds. Greg Hardy -260, -270, -300. Wow. I mean, I give Greg Hardy a good probability in winning this fight, but man, that's too much. That's too much, man. -278, more like -220. Yeah, that's a bit too much for Greg Hardy. Ben Sosoli, I know some of you boys are going to take a stab. Personally, I'm not. He's plus 200, plus 230, plus 240. Wow. Good odds coming back on Ben Sosoli. I know a few of you will, but I'm going to leave that one. Okay, now we get to a fight. Now we get to a fight in the co-main event. We should have already seen this fight. It's happening again, and I'm glad it didn't take too long to happen again. You know, it got rebooked quite quickly. And this is Yair Alpantaro Rodriguez versus Jeremy Lil Heavens Stevens. I'll start with Yair. So Yair Rodriguez comes into this fight 7-1 inside UFC. One of the most elite strikers in the UFC. Probably, arguably, the most elite striker at 145. Just one of the best kickers in the UFC. His kicks, he's got every kick in his arsenal, and he is absolutely deadly with it. If you give Yair Rodriguez the space to work his fight, you will lose to him every single time. Not even 9 times out of 10. Every single time you will lose to Yair Rodriguez if he has space to work his game. Now, his game being what I just said, he's an extremely elite kicker. So, space for an elite kicker is not good. You know, we see that with Boser. Yair Rodriguez is exactly the same. If he has space, he's going to look so good. Although, against Korean Zombie, Yair Rodriguez impressed me quite a bit in the pocket. In the pocket, looked very good. You know, had a very good jab. Was able to scramble with takedowns. Looked very good, you know. So even when Yair Rodriguez, the space was taken away, I felt he was winning moments against the Korean Zombie. That was an amazing fight. I'm sure all of us could speak about that fight for, you know, a good 10, 15, 20 minutes. His opponent, Jeremy Lil Heavens Stevens, comes into this fight 15 wins, 15 losses inside the UFC. This guy's seen it all. This guy has fought very good competition. He has basically his whole UFC career. And we know who Jeremy Stevens is. He's had 30 UFC fights. We know who he is. He's a dog. He's looking to take away that space. The space I'm talking about with Yair, he needs that space. Jeremy's whole game is taking away that space. And he wants to take your head off. So that's who Jeremy is. You know, there's not much technique behind it. He's looking to simply say, look, I'm going to step on your lead foot. I'm going to take away some space. We're going to be real close. And when I land this big shot, it's going to hurt you. I'm willing to take your shots too. Give me the best shot you have, because I'm going to walk through it and I'm going to take your head off. That's Jeremy Stevens. Sometimes it looks beautiful. So Gilbert Melendez, Jeremy Stevens actually showcased a beautiful calf kick in that fight. Against Troy, you know, beautiful performance. Against Josh Emmett, an extreme power puncher himself, Josh Emmett, you know, he stuck to his guns and he said, look, I'm the better dog. I'm going to still take away the space. I know you may want to too, but I'm going to land a huge shot. And Josh Emmett, I believe, actually put Jeremy down in that fight. So, yeah, really good fight. Against Jose Aldo, we just, you know, have to respect that the greats are still great. Jose Aldo, amazing performance. Against Zabit was able to find space. Now, that's exactly what has to happen here for Yair. I feel space is good, and if there's no space, a lot of the time, I think Jeremy Stevens is going to score a lot. So this isn't a 5-round fight this time. This is a 3-round fight. So it makes it a different fight. Jeremy Stevens is going to have to look to engage with that brawl quicker than before. Maybe he, you know, was going to be a bit more patient with it. But this time it's 15 minutes, and he has to set the tone straight away. He has to set the tone. Look, there's going to be no space for the first 5 minutes, and when we're done, if you're still standing, we're both going to be tired, and there's going to be no space again. So once again, man, Yair has to either put him out quick with a high kick or a quick counter, or really set the tone himself with great footwork. And I think both paths are very plausible, but I'm going to stick with my initial pick. I'm going to take the dog on this one. I think Jeremy Stevens is able to take away the space and get it done. Um, but I think Yair is very good too. So I'm not going to take it in the first round. I'm going to take my original pick. I think Jeremy Stephens is going to get a TKO in round number 2. We take a look at the odds. Minus, yep. Man, this whole card has a beautiful, beautiful betting throughout the whole thing. Both odds, minus 110, minus 115. No one knows. A lot of people are piling money on Yair. A lot of people are piling money on Jeremy. No one knows. I think it's beautiful. I think it once again replicates the sport we love. Great matchup and extremely hard to predict once again. And this moves us on into the main event. We have Chris, the All American Weidman, versus Dominick, the Devastator Reyes. And we'll start with the former champion Chris Weidman, the former champion at 185. He's 10-4 inside the UFC. An extremely talented wrestler, very, very talented wrestler. He's stepping up to 205 in this fight. What can we say about Chris Weidman, man? You know, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, very good wrestler, but just for the last few years, it has fallen away from him. You know, he's no longer a guy we all look at and go, this guy's a real champion. You know, just take a look at the last few years. The fight against Luke Rockhold seemed to be the turning point. After that, he didn't look the same. Yoel Romero, the devastating flying knee in the third. You know, Chris just so predictable. Just keeps going to that single. Just keeps shooting a single. And when you don't get a guy finished, when you get the guy to the ground and you don't finish him, and when you get back to the feet, you keep doing the same thing. It's always going to happen. It's always going to happen. Against Gegard Mousasi, Chris was doing pretty good. Ate a huge knee once again, and yeah, done in that fight. Against Kelvin Gastelum, I felt he was very lucky to win that fight. At the end of the first round, Chris got dropped. If there was 2 or 3 more seconds in that fight, potentially Kelvin would have finished him. But Chris was just the much bigger guy in there. You know, really wrestled Kelvin a lot, made him tired. And then against Jacare, which was his most recent fight, I took Chris in that fight. Arguably about to win a decision, arguably 2 rounds up, probably winning the third too. But the most surprising thing is Chris Weidman got TKO'd by a tired Jacare. So that just says everything you need to know about if Chris Weidman needs to keep the fight on the feet 10, 15 minutes. He's very tired too. He is extremely tired too. So you take a look at his opponent, Dominick the Devastator Reyes, comes into this fight 5-0 inside the UFC, training out of the Elevation Fight Team, which is known for having guys with great cardio. So yeah, let's take a look at Dominick Reyes here. The Devastator, that name comes from calf kicks. He got that name from calf kicks. He's a very good kickboxer, also strong with his hands. He can kick very well, and he has powerful hands. So both sides of the kickboxing, I believe, he's very strong in. And also a very good wrestler. We've seen this guy wrestle a few times in his fights, and he looks very strong there. I was actually at his last fight, which was in London against Volkan Ozdemir. I do believe Volkan won that fight. I scored it for Volkan Ozdemir, and I was really surprised. And then I saw everyone speaking about the robbery as well, who watched at home on TV, and I was happy we all saw the same fight there. I also saw Dominick Reyes the day before that fight. I went and met Darren Till and watched the guys train. And let me tell you, boys, Dominick Reyes is huge. He is huge. Like, I don't know how Chris Weidman wins this fight. I think if he doesn't take down Dominick Reyes and submit him, I think Chris is going to become tired. And it's not going to be the same kind of fatigue where he was tired against Kelvin Gastelum, but Kelvin was smaller and as tired, so Chris can still take him down. It's going to be one of those fights where the fight is kept on the feet. And Chris, you know, I think Chris can get badly hurt in this one. I really do. I think Dominick Reyes, like I said, he didn't beat Volkan Ozdemir. But he knows that too. Trust me, he knows that too. He's known about this huge main event opportunity for a few weeks. He's training real hard at a great camp that takes pride in great conditioning with their guys. And I think Dominick Reyes could badly hurt Chris Weidman here. So I'm going to take Dominick Reyes via TKO in round number 2. When we take a look at the odds for this final fight on this card, very good main event. Plus 130, plus 130 for Chris Weidman, minus 150, minus 140, minus 170, and minus 160. So we've just got a mixed price for Dominick Reyes here. So that tells me a lot of people have mixed feelings regarding his last fight and regarding the biggest fight in his career so far, which once again goes back to the love of this sport. We all have different opinions here. We all think different things based off of his last fight. But I'm sure a lot of us feel, look, Dominick Reyes did lose that last fight against Volkan. However, he may not perform like that again here. Chris Weidman isn't naturally a 205er. You know, it's going to take a lot for Chris Weidman to win this fight. I don't see him winning it on the feet. I only see him winning it on the mat, and I think Dominick Reyes is too strong to be taken down. So, yeah, minus 150, minus 160 for Dominick Reyes. I'm all over it. As always, boys, smack your comments down. I feel like this podcast was ages, but it probably wasn't. It was probably like roughly the same time. Maybe it's just because of those bowls. I feel like that. Yeah, this card's Friday night. It's going to be a bit weird compared to what we're used to, but it's only once a year, so it's fine. Appreciate you guys as always, and yeah, let's speak in the comments. I appreciate you all. Love you all. Peace.